It must have been now 2 summers ago that we got an email in the church office inviting us to consider joining the Vinery program. And we all sort of wondered if that was a typo. What is a vinery? We know what a vineyard is, but what is a vinery? And a vinery is a place where the vines are sort of cultivated and grafted into something bigger and more. So the Vinery is a part of, was a project of the Mere Christianity Forum, which is a ministry, a campus ministry at Furman University. And so they applied for a Lilly Foundation Thriving Congregation grant to develop this program. And this program then brings together cohorts of congregations of a variety of denominations and other sort of traditions, and that are all in close proximity to colleges and universities, and invites them to consider what these relationships might look like between the congregations and colleges and universities, and to develop some life together at what they call the intersection of faith and flourishing. So I don't know what sort of cultural context you all grew up in, but when I got to college as a preacher's kid, a mainline denominational active kid, I pretty much didn't go to church on Sunday mornings. I went to brunch and then I went to finish my course reading. And that was how I got through most of my years until I realized that I needed a pastor to recommend me for seminary. And then I started going to church because I couldn't have my dad write my letters. And so my faith was quiet, you might say. But there was this sort of clear sense from some of the campus religious groups that I did interact with periodically. I interviewed a lot of campus Christian groups for journalism class assignments. I was like, that's as close as I'm getting to religious practice as a college student. But there was very clearly a sense that in those groups that your faith was something that happened sort of in opposition almost to what you were learning in your classes. How were you going to hang on to your faith in the midst of, all this liberal education all around you? And I didn't quite think much of that, but then I got accepted into a program right after I graduated that was funded by the Pew Younger Scholars Program. And that was at Notre Dame, and it brought in Christian scholars to meet with Christian students over a 3-week period and run what was essentially a graduate level class on religion or literature or sociology. I did one with Nancy Ammerman, who's wonderful. She's at Hartford, I think, still. But it was really, there was this undercurrent that sort of again, if you were a Christian student who wanted to be in academia, there were some particular barriers you were going to want to erect for yourself so that you could protect your faith and your Christian identity when you got into the world of the academy, the godless academy. And that was so surprising to me because I don't think anything that I had learned in my, relatively engaged undergraduate career had really challenged my faith, right? I wasn't active, but I wasn't doubting. I was just lazy. And in fact, was going off now to pursue a ministry degree. So I had that in mind when we first got this letter. What is this? What is this? And Rhymes McKelvin, who is the program director of the Vinery, has I think, while perhaps not similar experiences, definitely has an understanding of how that is in some ways how the Christian church has thought about the academy and has thought about campus ministry and programming, that this is something that sort of happens outside of students' academic life or happens outside of faculty lives, that your faith is something that's totally separate. But the Vinery notes that we have complex identities and complex understandings, and that we really need to learn how to navigate together towards this faith and flourishing, right? So that the church does not stand outside of the university trying to bolster us against, any of these things, but rather that we want to help folks to learn and discern and to support them in the midst of their work. So that seemed cool. So we talked with CMRB and we decided that we would apply to participate in this inaugural cohort. And so we did, because, at least in part, we are a congregation that has so much connection to the university, both to UF and to Santa Fe, both in terms of staff and faculty and administrators. And yet we don't have a particularly large or thriving young adult ministry, or didn't at the time. Now, there were some things. We have had for many years a young adult ministry that is sort of nurtured by Judy Parsons. She takes the students to lunch. Pre-pandemic, it was once a month, and they would do other activities too. Sometimes they'd have a meal like a Christmas party, or they'd go, tubing on the Ichetucknee, or they'd do some sort of service trips together. But during the pandemic, because that group's membership tended to wax and wane according to semester schedules, it was really hard to sort of maintain over Zoom, as many ministries were. So we kind of were starting over again as we came back. So, and we thought that's a real shame, because we as a congregation, I think, have a lot to offer our the young adults in our community. So we began participating with the opening workshop in January of 2022. And Judy and I went up to Clemson to meet some of the other congregations and to learn a little bit about the process. And since then, we have monthly didactics online with the cohort and other folks that they bring in. Last summer, we welcomed the lead team from our partner church, which is they're Holy Trinity too. Holy Trinity up on the campus of Clemson University. They're an Episcopal congregation. Last January, Judy and I, and this time also accompanied by Lucy Stein, who lost her voice and is not with us this morning, though she had hoped to be, and Judy is at their home in North Carolina. So we all went to Clemson. Then we continued to participate in these didactics. And then just recently in June, Lucy and I went up to Clemson to visit with and learn from the congregation at Holy Trinity. So that is sort of where we are in terms of our Vinery participation. We have continued to see and welcome young adults in the life of the congregation. We have at various times up to 7 or 10 who go to lunch. We've increased our the frequency of those lunch gatherings from once a month to twice a month, though they took a bit of a hiatus. We also have we've really developed a lot of relationships with sort of individual young adults who come with a variety of pastoral needs, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing that we've noted is that this is a difficult time to be a member of the faculty, staff, and administration of the University of Florida. We have heard, and so we have gathered, hearing initially from some members of the staff and faculty about some concerns that they were having. Folks would come in to my office and sort of start to mention things that they were concerned about. They'd gotten reminders that their email could be checked at any time. And since that time, others have had to turn over their email passwords to their department chairs. So because of diversity, equity, and inclusion concerns about how they might be exercising and doing that work. The members of the staff or faculty have had to give over their email passwords so that other people can check their email to make sure they're not breaking the rules by talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in certain ways.
So just to clarify, all of you have emails on public record.
True.
So they actually don't need our path. Yeah, all UF emails are public records. So 6 months ago, they just requested from each unit the membership of diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, with the idea that those emails would be pulled so that they could understand what was going on with them. So no password was necessary. They can do all that centrally. I think, at least I've always assumed that anything I write in an email is public record. So it's actually a little bit shocking that it might be in other states where there's some assumption of privacy. But certainly it has a chilling effect when you know that they're specifically pulling emails from a particular group.
Asking for password is a more aggressive act than reading somebody's email,
Yes.
because that is a violation of.
Yeah. They don't need the password. That's just what I had heard from this person.
I mean, that I totally agree with him.
Yeah.
They can read it. But asking for password is something much more
Chilling. Yeah.
invasive.
Indeed. So, well, I can clarify, but regardless, there have been other folks who have experienced varying levels of distress and concern about their ability to teach openly, to care for students. So, so at any rate, we gathered a group as well with our inviting anyone on the faculty, staff, or administration here to just gather together and hear how they're doing, the things that are difficult for them in this moment, the things that are challenging, just to be a sort of committee of, or not a committee, but a gathering of mutual support. So people's experiences have varied widely. And so we did several of those gatherings throughout the spring. I can say more, but is there anything else you want to say?
All I wanted to say was that if the instance of password asking can be verified, then it's a violation of the union contract and is subject to a whole different set of protections.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Well, I can follow up with who I heard that from and do some clarifying. So, so one of the things that has been important in the to the Vinery's work is offering us some different frameworks to think about the ways that we engage with university congregation, with university campuses. So, so we are at this moment the only school in, or the only congregation in Florida. So the other congregations, there's one that's near the campus of Princeton. There's one at Emory. There's one in Virginia. There's one at Auburn. There's a UCC in Seattle. There's a Mennonite congregation in near Chico, like Northern California, and they got kicked off the campus of their Mennonite university with whom they had a relationship because they were too liberal. Anyway, so we are not the only ones. We are the only ones in Florida. We're not the only UCC congregation, but not the only ones in the South. So and they've been working really hard to, particularly with this second cohort, to make sure that our the congregations participating are racially diverse as well, which is really, I think, important. A lot of times, some of these Lilly funded programs are so white. So it's good that they've been really intentional about that. So, so they have invited us to think about, they've offered us in particular 2 different ways of thinking about how we engage with our university neighbors. So, the 2 different frameworks one is around public narrative, and one is around intentional design. So the public narrative piece invites us to do deep listening to our congregations, to think about who we are and what's important to us, but begins even prior to that with those on the lead team reflecting on why it is that they are called or feel compelled or interested in doing this work. And each of us were invited to craft a narrative to share around our story of self. So I have 2 sort of vignettes to share. The first of these was after my freshman year of college, my first semester. I came home and I was sitting in a friend's living room with a bunch of kids. You know, we were all hanging out, and one of our good friends came out to the group, and that was a brave and wonderful thing, and everyone was very affirming. But it was surprising to me because there was sort of like a catch in there, like a catch. They were watching me to see how I would respond, because I was I was the preacher's kid, and so they wondered if that would be okay, and that was like very okay. But I didn't have any language for why or how, or the friend who had come out, Andrew, was Korean American, and his family was very conservative Christian, and it was definitely not okay in their home. And so I wanted so much in that moment to have more to offer, to have legs for my acceptance, to have reasons and words of affirmation that could speak something stronger into all the negativity that he had from his religious upbringing at home. That's one. My senior year of college, a good friend of mine was followed home after a night out. A brief trigger warning, this is a mention of sexual assault. She was followed home and she was raped in her apartment. Because it was the weekend, our student health was closed. And so she had to go to Mass General, which is like way the hell away from our campus, and be in the waiting room and deal with, decide whether or not she wanted to talk to the police and how. It was all very, it was not a good experience, right? Obviously, it was not a good experience, but particularly the follow-up wasn't. And there were really no resources ever offered on campus, or that we knew what to do or how to get on campus. And we discovered too that our student health didn't really have rape kits, even if they had been open on the weekend. And that was such a jarring experience, because it was one of the first times for me that an institution that I had sort of looked to for all kinds of guidance, like, didn't have what we needed. And we didn't know where to go or where to look or who to ask. We all had wonderful relationships with our, faculty and whatever. And but we really didn't have a sense of where to go for help. It would have been nice to have some grown-ups around. So I come to this work then with a number of convictions, but with these 2 sort of moments really with me. One, I wish that I could have had and hope to give folks some language for why we are accepting and welcoming, and how folks might have an identity within the LGBTQ community and also a vibrant faith life. And secondarily, a way to connect folks when they are having really hard times with care and connection. We've heard from several of our folks who work in student health and student services just how overwhelmed the student counseling centers are. It is hard to get in and to get the care you need. And so I wonder how we can be a place that resources students in times of great need. When I had first gotten to UCG, I mean, I was still like in Chicago officially working here. We got a call in the office from a student who wanted a minister to talk her through the decision about whether or not to terminate a pregnancy. And I was like, okay, we're doing campus ministry now. And we haven't necessarily had that come up again since, but there are not, you know, there's a crisis pregnancy center right on University, which will help you reverse your abortion pill if you want. I don't think that's actually a thing. But I don't know where, and there is a Planned Parenthood that is, of course, experiencing all the difficulties of Planned Parenthoods across Florida. But I don't necessarily know where students can go for that sort of thing, if not us, maybe. So part of our work then is to find for ourselves our stories of self on the lead team, and then to come to the congregation and start to ask one another through this work of deep listening to the congregation as a whole, but then to the individuals too, to reflect on what is our story of we. Who are we as a congregation? Who have we been? What's important to us? Who are we as sort of individuals? We have, as I say, a lot of faculty and staff and administrators here, and folks who are deeply involved in and care about students and the university communities. So we have that sort of thing, but programmatically, we happily let people not bring their work to church, which is nice. But programmatically, we haven't had a whole lot of programs that reflect the depth of experience and connection within our congregation. So that's something for us to be thinking about. And then eventually, as we start to figure out who we are, then we can start to communicate that to others, to students, to perhaps to offer ourselves to student services, or I don't know, for a number of years, the Office of Multicultural Students and Diversity, I don't even know what their full title is, but they had a list of campus ministries and nearby congregations, and Judy will tell you, you could get a parking pass if you were going to be on campus, which is like gold, right? And there were different ways to engage. Now the Campus Multi-Faith Association is sort of tied in what it can do, and is a little bit paralyzed in the ways that they relate to the university. So as we begin to figure out who we are and what resources we have among us and what passions we have to share, we can try to engage with various offices who might be interested in even just listing us on the website. But moreover, we can start to be asking in some really intentional ways the young adults in our care and in our periphery, what they need as well. So from there, then we move to intentional design, and that becomes much more a sense of a process of, again, asking different groups of folks what it is that is needed in this particular moment. A lot of us have thoughts about what we're always very good at knowing what other people need. But the Vinery has asked us to think very clearly about what faculty, students, administrators, staff, and alums might need from, so these various constituents, what they might need from a congregation like ours. How could the resources that we have among us serve these different communities? And so again, that is, they encourage listening to setting up meetings with folks in, student counseling and student services and all of these different offices, and kind of asking questions. And then we too can also ask the students in our care. So we've done a lot of listening, and what we know, again, is that a lot of folks are feeling a little unnerved about their professional lives if they are working at the University of Florida, or I hear it less at Santa Fe, but I haven't asked as many folks at Santa Fe, feeling a little unnerved about what is happening there. Some are feeling and experiencing real conflicts with the things that they know to be true through their work and their discipline and what they are allowed to say or teach or publish. We have seen also and heard about, the difficulties of faculty searches or getting residents to come to your programs in the hospital. And so it's a challenging moment. And I know too, it is hard to see something that you have given your life to or your career to start to go badly because of decisions that are outside your control or decisions you think are unwise. So it hurts. As a side note, my mom is a high school teacher, and she and her colleagues spent, 30 years building the theater department at the high school in our town in Illinois. And just recently, the woman who took over when my mom's colleague first retired as the director, she took the play and they won like best performance in the state, right? I mean, she's an award-winning director. They've built this program, and they fired her. They tanked her program. And so anyway, my mother is grieving. This is her career, her legacy. And they're just so anyway, I feel that sort of energy talking to folks in this moment. So we know that. We also know, again, that this is an extremely difficult economic moment for a lot of young adults. Healthcare is a concern. Gender affirming healthcare is a real concern. Affordable housing is a concern. The expenses of adulthood, all of these things are really hard, figuring out how to navigate. And students are, there are some that are so deeply resourceful, and there are some who just really need a lot of encouragement, and they're so young in some ways. But so there's a diversity, but I continue to believe that there's a real place for caring, resourced adults in the lives of younger adults who are learning the ropes. So at this moment, then, we are, I think, at this place where I'd like to invite you to think about how you might want to see this program kind of go from here. We have these processes that they have that they've shared with us that we can invite folks to walk through here. We're doing so many processes already here at UCG. You may have heard that we have a transition team, and we're thinking about capital campaign. There's a lot going on, right? So maybe the last thing we need is another process. But I think that some of these tools are really helpful in thinking about and even shaping those conversations as we move forward. When we went up to Clemson, we saw the Holy Trinity's campus space, right? So they have the sanctuary, and they have a preschool, and they have the offices, and some of the other spaces. And then it's sort of up on the hill, and so then there's this first floor / undergroundy space, but it has windows. It's awesome. That they built, and it has a large gathering room, a kitchenette, bathrooms with showers, a sort of multi-use devotional space, and then a conference room, right? And it's comfortable and lovely and a nice place to study or have a meeting or have a worship service, or there's space available. When I was working at the University of Chicago, one of our great innovations was to open the campus, or to open the chapel up during finals times, with lots of power strips and, endless coffee and snacks and, meditation cushions that you could sleep on or meditate on, and to create those sort of safe and welcoming spaces. So, so thinking about space, I think, is an important question for us in this particular moment as we think about some of our capital dreams. We also are in the midst of experimenting around having one service on Sunday mornings, which is nice. It felt real full this morning, good energy. But also, does that help us to think about maybe we would want to do a different kind of service at some point, a storytelling service in an evening once a month, with dinner or something, or a Vespers or a Taizé, something more sort of end of day calming thing. And if we wanted to do something like that, who would staff it? So there's all these sorts of questions, so that while, again, we have some good resources in these deep listening, intentional design, and public narrative pieces, there's also these sort of really practical questions that are coming, I think, at a good moment for us, because we have a lot of opportunity to be asking questions like that right now. So I have talked a lot, and I'm so sorry. You can tell I've had a lot of coffee today already, but so I'll be quiet. But what are you hearing? Is there anything here that is interesting or exciting or? I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Taylor.
I can very much appreciate the concept of listening.
So I was wondering if you thought about or talked about food insecurity among students, and probably not faculty members, but students especially, because I know that was something that came up and that you mentioned along the way. So I don't know if that's been discussed, but I think that's probably a big deal too.
Yeah, we have, one of the congregations, yes, found that on their campus food insecurity was a huge thing for their student body. And so they then, the bulk of their energy went towards crafting that, a program to meet that. Gainesville Community Ministries is not right on campus. So it would be a bit of a trek to get over there if that was one of your challenges. So no, I don't know, but I think that would be an important question to be asking.
There is a food pantry on campus.
Is there? That's great. Is it used?
Nice.
Yeah. One of the things Holy Trinity has is a garden also, and it's called the Same Garden. I'm like, that is a terrible name for a garden, but it's called So All May Eat. And so they only grow food, and then they give it over to one of the hunger ministries in the community. So that's, yeah. Can you use SNAP money for supplemental nutrition and something with a P program? That food stamps, basically, can you use that for farmers markets or vegetables in Florida? Yeah.
I just want to say one of the things you mentioned was coming up with some sort of, I don't know exactly what, I can't remember the words you used exactly, but a statement of who we are. I just joined in January and I got that as a new member. So I guess what I'm saying is it seems to me that since, that we do that for new members already. And I don't think there's anything that, I mean, I was trying to imagine myself, as you were saying, that if I was 18, 19, 20 and looking for refuge, which I think now it's sort of reversed, that the liberal students on campus are looking for refuge, that everything that was said to me when I was joining would be entirely appropriate for students, maybe just tweaked slightly in that, and making an effort to connect them with some of the younger people already in our church.
Yeah.
But I got that loud and clear when I joined, that statement of who we are. So
That's great.
So the comment about food insecurity. Yeah, there is a food pantry, like Tim said, and it's very highly patronized, but there is still probably need for a lot more. So when I was a student, a local organization, I think associated with mostly restaurant owners, but for some strange reason decided to have a spaghetti night every week on Tuesdays. 50 cents is what they charged. 50 cents. Everybody can. And the 50 cents was essentially supposed to monitor. It's not a free one.
Right.
But everybody should be able to afford it.
Right.
And the meal. That actually attracted a huge crowd and maybe worth considering.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have talked about how a community, sorry. Yeah. That was my experience when I did campus ministry as well. Anytime you had food, there would be some that had, there would be people who came for your program, but then there would be folks who just came because they needed to eat. And that is a good thing to be able to provide. So, and so as we start thinking about our capital project, is there a need for a greater capacity to prepare and serve food here? You know, I knew there is affordable lunch, but it's still $5, right? But the from the Krishna lunch, you know.
50 cents was back in
Well, I'm sorry, but if you have a true community meal too, I mean, we've talked about, you know, something for that would be open to anybody. So, I mean, if you did a pay what you can, you know, there are always folks who can toss in more, and but you'd need, anyway, there's different funding models, right? But I think that's a really important thing and a great way to build community too.
I support that. I think that's the first piece. I think it's an important first step of navigating where we're going. I mean, not that we do it blindly, but would be easy to find out the nature of issues, those things that we can provide, and it's a fellowship building easy along the way.
Yeah.
Is the focus of the Vinery connecting students and bringing them in, or is it taking services out to them?
I think it is about each congregation discerning what the need is on the campus. So whatever the relationship looks like. So if it is not the sense that you are trying to get kids to come to your church, that is not it. It's so if we were providing a meal here, or if we were providing a meal elsewhere, it's just a question of what is easiest to access and what is most possible for us. So it's that sort of nexus of what can we do, what are our strengths, and what are the needs.
Because I think in the sense of some students knowing that we are here, if they want a refuge, they want a place or to connect, you know, letting them know we're here, but also serving them. But yeah, I was just curious because I wasn't sure what the focus would be.
We've also talked about that one of our interns is really active in a variety of justice, social justice sort of circles and clubs on campus, and is already at, like, you know, 20 years old, sort of getting burnt out because it's very hard to be an activist right now. It feels like a lot of folks are fighting a lot of losing battles all the time. And so, but the sort of student activist communities, at least according to this particular student, don't have a real huge involvement with some of the other justice works and organizations in the community. And so sharing resources of expertise and energy and bodies could be, you know, life-giving in a new way also.
Well, in terms of food, I would say, like, it's really hard to find an apple or an orange on campus. So you can find a lot of affordable, crappy snacks. That's one thing, but also what you were mentioning in terms of decision-making support, like open-minded decision-making support in terms of pregnancy, in terms of gender, in terms of everything. The student wellness center often is geared towards helping them keep performing academically versus a place that can maybe advise them with a more open mind, like, right, maybe it's time to stop, or maybe it's time to take a break. I don't know. So I would say that those two areas.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk, as we're like sitting in various meetings and conversations is, and particularly with Talia, and when we were writing the application for the Christian Parenting and Caregiving Initiative, one of the things that we talked about was the need for that a lot of families have for like additional sort of case management services, or like access to a mental health professional who could like just get them know where to start, in terms of finding resources. And so, so one of the parts of our grant that we wrote, which we didn't get, but still a good effort, was that was what would it be if we had hours to hire someone like that? So as we think about like if we were going to hire another staff person, would it be someone who could lead a worship service or could lead small groups, or would it be somebody who also maybe had an MSW? So I think that there's again some thinking about what the needs are before our wider community.
Romney, what do we know about what some of the other campus ministries do? I know there used to be student centers up there on University Avenue for maybe the Lutherans, and I'm not sure Presbyterian. I'm not sure who all had student centers, but what do we know about what some of the other denominations are doing for their student outreach?
Yes. I don't know a whole lot, so we should do some exploring. I mean, Gator Wesley has, a lot of, I think they have both, social justice opportunities and, if you want to do, or more like community service opportunities, they have worship opportunities, they have a community meal and a coffee shop and recreation stuff. So I know there are a number of sort of Christian parachurch organizations like Crew, the now newly renamed Campus Crusade for Christ is now Crew. There's some others, InterVarsity, like some of those that are still around and pretty active, but I don't know I don't think the Presbyterian Student Center exists as it was anymore. The Lutheran Church is that's right there on campus, is not hugely staffed or programmatically robust. I think the Catholic and the Episcopal ministries are okay and offer some things too, but that's a very particular kind of ministry too, in terms of spiritual nurture. So. Anyway, it would be really good to find out some more. I guess as we are sort of wrapping up, and I'm sorry again we started so late, but I don't want to keep you forever. I think we've started these conversations and we've talked to the students sort of in our periphery and in our care. We've asked Holden about stuff, and we've heard again from a number of folks who are sort of experiencing stress as sort of a pastoral ministry with them, but we haven't really had. But I've really hesitated to ask those folks who are currently really enmeshed in their careers and the difficulties of that to take the lead on the next steps here, the exploration steps, the fact finding and the relationship building with some of those offices and things like that. So as we go, if you have come today, thank you for coming today. And if you have, and if you leave sort of wanting to explore any one of these topics more, I'd love to hear and try to gather maybe a group of folks who'd be willing to explore some of those things together. Again, I'm, so not wanting to launch a whole nother committee or anything, but maybe even just a small group for the fall. But do let me know. So thank you all.
Thank you all.